My teacher just face-planted into my naked ween. So the most unbelievable, insane, and embarrassing thing just happened today, and I have no idea how I'm going to mentally cope with this. So I'll start by confessing to strangers on the internet. I'm a high school student, struggling with the current geometry unit we've been studying. Thankfully, my previous math teacher, Mrs. Smith, who happens to be a friend of the family, sometimes helps me out. Secretly, I have the biggest crush on her, and that is why I love going to tutoring. She's about 5'4", blonde hair, nice round glasses, and most days she wears tight jeans that hug her butt perfectly. Today after class, I met up with Mrs. Smith for some extra assistance with my homework. We sat down together in the school's library and began working through the problems. About half an hour into our study session, her phone rang, and she walked a couple of meters away to take the call from her husband. Seizing the opportunity while she was distracted, I noticed that my computer was running low on battery. I decided to plug it in to continue our work smoothly. The nearest outlet was quite far away, so my charger barely reached, causing the cable to hang like a tripwire above the ground. Little did I know this innocent act would lead to one of the most mortifying moments of my life. As Mrs. Smith turned around and headed back toward me, still engrossed in her conversation, she didn't notice the low-hanging cable. The next thing I knew, she tripped over it, and in a split second, my computer slid off the desk, hitting me on the leg before slamming shut onto my pants and underwear. The impact caused it to fall to the ground, pantsing me and exposing, well, everything. Mrs. Smith, with an unfortunate timing that seemed to be straight out of a comedy sketch, face-planted into my now completely naked assets. I was mortified, and she must have been too. In the background, I could hear her husband's concerned voice on the phone, asking what happened. She picked up the phone, sighed, and told her husband she had to go, quickly ending the call. Both of us were red-faced and flustered, and we silently agreed not to tell anyone about this awkward and embarrassing incident. I thought to myself, bro, I'm never going to her for help again, Lamau. But little did I know that fate had other plans for us. Mrs. Smith was not only my previous math teacher, but was also someone our family had grown close to over the years. She was invited to my upcoming graduation party, and that thought made me cringe with embarrassment. As the days passed, I couldn't get the incident out of my mind. I tried to focus on studying for my other classes and preparing for graduation, but the memory of that humiliating moment lingered like a dark cloud. Finally, the day of my graduation party arrived. Friends, family, and teachers gathered to celebrate this milestone in my life. Among the guests was Mrs. Smith, who came with a warm smile. The graduation party was in full swing, and the atmosphere was filled with joy and celebration. I tried to enjoy the moment, but the memory of the embarrassing incident with Mrs. Smith still haunted me. As the evening wore on, I couldn't help but notice Mrs. Smith mingling with the other guests, who seemed oblivious to our awkward encounter. As the night progressed, Mrs. Smith approached me with that same warm smile, but there was a hint of nervousness in her eyes. I knew that she wanted to talk about what happened, and the anticipation made my heart race even faster. "Congratulations on your graduation," she said, trying to sound casual, but her voice betrayed her unease. "Thank you," I replied. We stood there in silence for what felt like an eternity, neither of us knowing how to broach the subject. Finally, Mrs. Smith cleared her throat and spoke, her words coming out in a slightly jumbled manner. "About the other day, the incident with the computer and all, I just want to say I'm sorry, it was so clumsy of me." I nodded, feeling my cheeks flush with embarrassment all over again. "It's okay, really. I should have been more careful with the charger." The awkwardness between us was unbearable. We exchanged a few more awkward looks before other guests interrupted our conversation. The rest of the party continued in a haze of mixed emotions, relief, embarrassment, and a hint of humor. As the party started to end, I noticed that Mrs. Smith had been at the bar area a lot. She looked sad. I figured that she needed a drink to cope with the embarrassment of this mess. I walked up to her and asked if she was all right. She turned around and said, "I'm okay, thanks." "Well, truthfully, the night I fell onto your, ween, my thoughts about you have changed. That night I went home to my husband and I couldn't stop thinking about how your, thing was so much bigger than my husband's."